In 2009, a psychologist named Peter Gollwitzer published research that changed how we understand goal achievement. He discovered that announcing your goals to others gives your brain a premature sense of completion. The social recognition you receive from telling people what you're going to do partially satisfies the same need that achieving the goal would satisfy. In other words, talking about your success is neurologically indistinguishable from having it, and it quietly kills your drive to actually get there. This is the psychology of people who win quietly, and once you understand it, you'll never announce a goal the same way again. If this is your first time here, welcome to Wisdom Forgotten. Subscribe. We take ancient Eastern wisdom and modern psychology and turn them into tools you can actually use. Now, let's get into it. Let's start with what Gollwitzer actually found. His research team ran a series of experiments. In each one, participants stated a goal, something they intended to work toward. Some participants announced their goals publicly, others kept them private. Then they were given time to work on their goals before being interrupted and asked how close they felt to achieving them. The results were striking. The people who had announced their goals felt significantly closer to achieving them, despite having done the same amount of work as those who stayed silent. The announcement itself created a feeling of progress, a sensation of movement without any actual movement having occurred. Your brain, it turns out, cannot fully distinguish between the identity you have and the identity you perform for others. When you tell people you're going to build a business and they nod and they say, "That's amazing," and they treat you like someone who is building a business, your brain registers a version of arrival. Not complete arrival, but enough. Enough to reduce the tension that was driving you toward the goal. Enough to soften the hunger. And hunger, in the pursuit of anything significant, is not the enemy. Hunger is the fuel. The Japanese understood this centuries before Gollwitzer had a laboratory. They embedded it into a principle called Mokusou, silence of the mind. Mokusou was practiced before every training session in the dojo. Every student would sit in stillness, in silence, clearing the mind of noise, clearing it of performance, clearing it of the need to be seen. Before any work began, silence. Not because silence was comfortable, because silence was where the real work lived. The samurai who announced his training in the village square was considered not disciplined, but weak, because he needed the village's recognition to sustain his commitment. The truly committed needed no witness. Their commitment was its own sustenance. But this goes deeper than just not announcing goals. The psychology of quiet winners reveals an entire operating system that is fundamentally different from what modern culture promotes, and it has three distinct components. The first component is identity before outcome. The loud achiever pursues the outcome and hopes the identity follows. The quiet achiever builds the identity first and trusts the outcome to follow. There is a profound difference between "I'm trying to become a writer" and "I am a writer," one who is working. Between "I'm trying to get fit" and "I am someone who moves their body every day." The quiet winner has already decided who they are. The outcome is simply the inevitable expression of that identity. They're not waiting for the result to tell them who they are. They already know. And that knowing makes the work non-negotiable. Not because they are more disciplined, because they are not doing it to prove something to anyone. They are doing it because it is simply what they do, who they are. The Zen concept of Mushin, no mind, speaks directly to this. Mushin is the state of action without the burden of self-consciousness, without the internal audience watching and judging, without the performance of effort. The quiet winner operates in something close to Mushin during their work. They are not thinking about how the work looks, they are doing the work. The absence of external audience creates space for complete presence, and complete presence is where the highest quality work lives. The second component is what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, and what the Japanese call do, the way, the path itself as the purpose. Extrinsic motivation is driven by external reward, recognition, approval, status, money. It is powerful in the short term and deeply unreliable in the long term because external rewards require external conditions. If the recognition stops, the motivation stops. If the approval disappears, the drive disappears. Intrinsic motivation is driven by the internal experience of the work itself, the satisfaction of doing something well, the pleasure of mastery, the meaning found in the process, independent of the outcome. Research by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, the founders of self-determination theory, showed consistently that intrinsic motivation produces higher quality work, greater persistence, and deeper satisfaction than extrinsic motivation. And critically, external rewards, when introduced to intrinsically motivated behavior, actually reduce the intrinsic motivation. The child who loved drawing for joy starts drawing for praise and loses the joy. The person who loved their craft starts performing it for recognition and loses the craft. The quiet winner has protected their intrinsic motivation by removing the primary source of external reward from their daily work: the audience, the announcement, the response. They are doing it because they love the doing, and that love is inexhaustible in a way that external validation never is. The third component is what I want to spend the most time on because it is the least discussed and perhaps the most important. It is the relationship with failure that quiet winners have developed, specifically the privacy of their failures. When you announce your goals publicly, you create a social contract. People know what you said you would do, which means when you fail, and you will fail, everyone who attempts anything significant fails repeatedly, you fail publicly. And public failure triggers the same neurological response as social rejection, physical pain, threat, the survival response. Which means your brain, in its infinite wisdom, begins to associate the pursuit of the goal with the threat of public failure. And it starts to protect you from that threat the only way it knows, by not pursuing the goal. The quiet winner fails privately. Their failures belong only to them. There is no social contract to break, no public promise to answer for, no performance of resilience required. They can fail honestly, learn completely, adjust immediately, and continue without the additional weight of managing other people's perception of their failure. Failure for the quiet winner is pure information, undiluted by shame, uncomplicated by audience, just data, just feedback, just the next step in understanding what works. The Japanese concept of Kaizen, continuous improvement through small, consistent, private actions, is built entirely on this relationship with failure. In the Toyota factory where Kaizen was developed, workers were actively encouraged to identify failures, problems, and inefficiencies, not to hide them, not to be ashamed of them, because every failure was a treasure, a specific, precise indication of exactly where improvement was needed. The failure was not the opposite of progress, it was the mechanism of it. Your failures are your most valuable data, but only if you can access them honestly. And honesty about failure requires privacy. The quiet winner has created the conditions for honest failure by removing the audience that turns failure into performance. So what does this look like practically? How do you actually build the operating system of the quiet winner? 3 things: specific, applicable, starting today. The first is what Gollwitzer himself recommended after his research: implement intentions rather than announce goals. Instead of telling people what you're going to achieve, tell no one, and instead write down specifically when, where, and how you will do the work. Not, I'm going to write a book, but every morning at 6 a.m. I will sit at my desk and write for 45 minutes before I open anything else. The specificity of implementation intention is 4 times more effective at producing follow-through than goal announcement. 4 times. Because it bypasses the social performance entirely and programs the behavior directly into your daily architecture. The second is a daily practice of Mokusou. Before you begin your most important work each day, before you open the laptop, before you pick up the tool, before you start, sit in silence for 2 minutes. Not meditation in the formal sense, just silence. Clearing the internal audience, removing the imagined observers, entering the work for the work itself. 2 minutes of Mokusou before the work changes the quality of everything that follows, because you are entering it as yourself, not as a performer, not as someone who needs to be seen doing this, just as the person who is doing it. The third is a private record of progress, not a public accountability post, not a shared tracker, a private journal, physical or digital, that belongs only to you, where you record what you did, what you learned, what failed, what shifted. This serves two functions. It gives your brain the record of progress it needs to sustain motivation, because the brain does need to see movement, it just doesn't need an audience for it. And it gives you honest access to your failures without the distortion of performance. Your journal doesn't need to be impressed, it just needs to be true. And truth, accumulated over time, becomes the clearest map of your own growth you will ever have. Here is what I want to leave you with. The quiet winner is not quiet because they are humble. They are quiet because they have understood something most people haven't, that the work is the reward, that the identity is the foundation, that failure is the teacher, and that none of these things require an audience to be real. The most powerful thing you are building right now, the version of yourself that is emerging through the daily, private, unwitnessed work, does not need anyone to know about it to be real. It is real. It is happening in the silence, in the early mornings, in the repeated failures that nobody saw and the small wins that nobody celebrated. It is all real. And one day, without announcement, without performance, without a reveal, you will simply be there, where you were always going. And the only person who will fully understand the journey is the one who made it. Keep working. Keep it quiet. The work knows. Subscribe to Wisdom Forgotten. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what goal have you been keeping quietly, working on in private? I read every single one. See you in the next video.